Welcome to a podcast about Turkey. But before we go any further at all on this podcast, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. I want you to take out a piece of paper and a pencil and draw the outline of the country of Turkey completely from heart, from memory. Don't worry, there's no grading. It's not going to be graded, except maybe by you. When you have the outline completed, put a circle where Istanbul is located. Then, to the top of the map, write the name of the body of water that's on the north, and at the bottom, write the name of the body of water that's south of Turkey. For special credit, you can write in the names of the countries that you know that surround Turkey. No cheating. Don't look at an atlas map until you are finished with your memory map. Pause the podcast and draw and label now. Start the podcast again when you are finished. Welcome back. At the end of the podcast, MAGE would like you to draw the map again and then compare the two to compare any progress that you made. As we hear traditional Turkish music in the background, it may call up visions of a far-off and exotic place, which many of us only have connections to through novels and poetry. What is Turkey like, physically and culturally? What's it like to be there? What's it like to walk around the streets? In this series, you can learn about Turkey as a special geographic place from someone who knows it well. You are listening to a podcast created by the Minnesota Alliance for Geographic Education. Our mission is to help you understand your world better through geography. On some devices, this podcast will show visuals, chapter controls, and clickable internet links. Several Minnesota geography standards are addressed by this podcast. This podcast is directed at 8th and 9th grade students and teachers, as well as anyone interested in the country of Turkey. Our presenter is Mr. Dan Johnson, who has visited Turkey over 20 times since 1970, and a master teacher who retired from Spring Lake Park Schools. Dan also taught classes in the North Suburban Summer Academy program for many years and holds a master's degree in curriculum and instruction. I'm Fred Kunze, a member of the Minnesota Alliance for Geographic Education. The MAGE microphone is in with Dan Johnson today. He's a retired teacher who's traveled to Turkey. How many times, Dan, have you traveled there?
Oh, probably about 20 times.
About 20 times over since the 1970s, I think you mentioned?
Yes.
Yeah. And the first thing we're going to do is to kind of place Turkey geographically. So we'll start with its site, specifically the site is 39 degrees north latitude and 35 degrees east longitude. Now, we can look that up on a globe, but we kind of want to have a better feel for what Turkey looks like and feels like in general terms. Can you describe, for example, if you're looking at it on a map, what would it be like? What would the shape be like?
Well, it's kind of the shape of a rounded rectangle. It's about almost 1,000 miles wide and about 500 miles north to south.
And that's why it makes such a nice rectangle, I guess, is because it has that 2-to-1 ratio of 1,000 to 500. That tells us about the shape, and maybe it'll be easier to help us draw it from memory when we try that. But let's talk a little bit about the landscape itself. If you were there, if you could suddenly zoom around from one place to another and get a feel for the surface and what you see as you go around, what are some of the main geographic features that we can see in Turkey?
Well, the land is known for the Anatolian plateau in the center, and that's surrounded by some mountains, both in the east and in the west, and then the land usually goes down low toward the coast. So the lowland near the coast includes about 5,000 miles of coastland. So the coastline is surrounded by three main bodies of water: the Black Sea to the north, the Aegean Sea to the west, and the Mediterranean Sea, which is about half the border along the south side of Turkey. Yeah, the bordering countries to Turkey are Russia and Iran on the east, Iraq and Syria on the south, and Greece and Bulgaria on the west.
So it's situated right in the middle of all these countries, and with all that water around it, it probably has played an important role over time in the movement of people and goods and things like that. Are there any particular places are there any differences between the northern coast and the southern coast?
Well, I've stayed on the Black Sea coast, and it does have a different feel up there. It seems like it's not, it's not as recreational as the southern or east or west coasts. And Istanbul is the largest city and the largest port in Turkey. So you'll see a lot of cargo ships loading and unloading and waiting in the Bosphorus Sea. And then as you travel down the west coast toward Izmir or down to the south toward Antalya, you see a lot more resort areas. So there'll be, a lot of beach activities and things like that.
So this Anatolian plateau in the middle, that's relatively flat, gradually rising and falling land. If we were sitting out there and are looking around, would that be true, or is there a different perception that you have?
I think so.
Yeah, okay. Is there any place in the United States you've been that's similar to the Anatolian plateau?
Well, the United States also has a large variety of lands. I guess you could compare the climate to the United States, because we do have hot summers. When you're on the plateau or the eastern Turkey, it gets much hotter there. Like maybe the south part of the United States, but the summers I kind of compare to Minnesota, because even though the temperature is similar, it's more of a dry, sometimes a dry heat, and if you're near the coast, a lot more humidity.
Okay, that gives us a picture of the geography of Turkey. Thank you very much. That concludes the Physical Geography Introduction to Turkey. But wait just a minute now. It's time to draw from heart Turkey on a blank piece of paper. We're going to do that once more. We're going to compare it to the one you drew at the beginning. So first, draw the outline, then label the major bodies of water. Then place Istanbul and the Bosphorus Strait on the map. Draw something on the map to show the relative locations of the mountains. Finally, label up to 5 border countries on the map in their proper locations. When you have done that, compare it to the map you drew at the start of the podcast. It's up to you if you're satisfied with your accuracy and your completeness. You have been listening to a production of the Minnesota Alliance for Geographic Education. Background music is courtesy of Jim Hogue of Decorah, Iowa. The Minnesota Alliance is a nonprofit group of volunteer educators who work to promote and enhance understanding of our world through improved geographic literacy.